There's quite an incredible story of religion and dogma in that country, and there's clashes and there's wars and there's a deep, deep faith that is almost untouchable in so many people. And I had so much appreciation for that. And so I took little pieces of that. I took pieces of the Hinduism and the Jainism everywhere I went, from the little temples and I was diagnosed with a pretty progressive type of cancer, lymphoma. So it was in my lymphatic system, which is a risky one because it moves really quickly. So I was given a high risk diagnosis, and pretty much people told me it was a death wish, that I was. I traveled a lot right after I was diagnosed. I first went to the jungle and explored plant medicines, and that was very powerful and opening. And ultimately, that's where I started to find my voice. I wouldn't say complete eradication, but a loosening of the fear of death, of being sick. I was able to understand what sickness is. I was able to see myself in my light, and that was so helpful in helping me stand up in myself. And ultimately, I think that's the greatest thing, was standing up in myself, loving myself, being true to myself, speaking my truths, and ultimately singing, which is now what I do pretty much for a living.
Yeah.
And before that, I hadn't been singing at all. I was quite terrified of my own voice.
Welcome back to Infants on Thrones. I'm Glenn Osland, and this is episode 600. And I'm sitting down and talking with a very new, very good, dear friend of mine, Sara Emmitt. Sara is a professional singer. She's a cancer survivor. She's a world traveler, and you're going to get to know her a little bit today. We're going to have Sara back again, hopefully many times. Let's just get right to it, because her music is beautiful, her story is beautiful. Sara's just a beautiful person, and I am so privileged to be able to share this with you, my listeners of Infants on Thrones. So without any further ado. All right, Sara. Sara, thank you for coming on Infants on Thrones. I haven't told you much about what Infants on Thrones is, have I?
No, not really.
When you hear this title, Infants on Thrones, does it conjure up anything in your mind?
Well, I've worked a lot with infants, and I always think that they're my greatest teachers, my greatest gurus. So
Ooh.
put them on a throne, I think they are very worthy of being of being appreciated as royalty, because they are my greatest teachers.
That's awesome! Wow, non-rehearsed answer. I love it. Yeah, we got it actually. There was the Mormon founder Joseph Smith gave a lecture once called the King Follett Discourse, and he was talking. It was at a funeral, and so he was talking about like eternal life, and he went into the whole character and nature of God, and I mean some really interesting things that he talked about in there. But at one point, he looked down and he saw these women in the congregation, and he said that a lot of times women who lose their children early in childbirth or at a really young age, they want to know, will they be able to be with their children again? Will they see them again? And so he said that there are many infants enthroned upon the heavens, throughout the eternities, and mothers, you will be able to be reunited with your children again, and that sort of thing. So we thought that was a funny image of infants on thrones in the heavens. And for us, it just kind of meant, look, we know we're still figuring things out. We don't have all the answers. We're still learning and growing. And the throne, I think, that we think of as just this microphone, and that we have some kind of a platform to speculate and think and just share what we're seeing and at any point in our growing journey as we're moving from infants to whatever comes after that. So thank you for coming on Infants on Thrones.
My pleasure,
Sara. And I've had the privilege of sitting with you and listening to you sing and singing with you a few times. I was first introduced to you, I think it was back in August, a mutual friend of ours.
Mm-hmm.
and he said, you've got to hear this song, and it's a version of a traditional Hawaiian Ho'oponopono song, which I'll play a clip of so people can have a sense of what the traditional song sounds like compared with what you wrote.
I'm sorry, please forgive me. I love you and I thank you. I'm sorry, please forgive me.
But he said this singer, she developed cancer, and this song was part of her cure, and then was cured from cancer. And it was just this miraculous story. The song itself is incredibly powerful, and I listened to it many times, and there's different lyrics that stick out to me all the time. But so I wanted to bring you on. I wanted to hear your story and share that with my listeners, and share your music with them, because your music is awesome, and you're just beautiful in every expression of who you are and what you do. So no pressure, Sara. and just one last thing, and then I'll turn it over to you, just so that you know, most of the listeners that I have are people who were raised as a Mormon. Many of them still attend. Their belief in God, their belief in the teachings of Mormonism are all over the place. I think most people probably don't believe it much anymore. If they do still attend church, it's because they're married to somebody who really believes it, and they want to maintain the marriage. But it's a lot of people who have been hurt by ideas of faith and God, and maybe a little hesitant to re-embrace with any kind of spirituality or any kind of faith. So that's kind of the audience, I think, mainly that you're going to be talking to.
Okay.
So,
great.
So what's your background, Sara? Did you grow up in any kind of a religion?
You know, I feel very fortunate for the upbringing that I had, that both of my parents came from very strict upbringings, religious upbringings. And by the time they had my sister and I, they had somewhat renounced all of their religious ideas, because they weren't sure of them anymore. They weren't sure that they were working for them and their families. And so they kind of gave us the choice, like, here's all your options. There's a lot of things you can believe in. There's a lot of systems of belief. You choose. And I'm so grateful for that. I was lost for a long time, I must say, especially when I was a teenager, going to church with my friends or synagogue, or my dad was practicing Buddhism. So I went to a lot of Buddhist meetings and just searching, for a place to find God. And ultimately, what the beauty of all of it was, is that it directed me back to myself. Because when I went to all these places, I had a really hard time finding God in a church or in a synagogue or in these Buddhist meetings. I found beauty. I found amazing people. I found community. And that was really valuable. And I still appreciate all of that. And I still attend certain meetings and religious gatherings just for that, just for the feeling. Ultimately, though, to find my spirituality with my own practices in my bedroom, on my yoga mat, and in my meditations, and in my practices of self-love. That's where I put my if I could use the word religious practices, that's what I would call them. Yeah.
What are some of those things? What are the things that you've done to find yourself? I loved how you said that all of that lost journeying through religion, it just brought you back to yourself. Like, what does that mean to you, and how did you come to yourself?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest ways I've learned to come to myself is through traveling. I travel a lot, and I have always been a seeker in that way, in the physical way. And what I love is meeting and exploring new cultures. So, for example, I just came back from 6 months in India, and there's quite an incredible story of religion and dogma in that country. And there's clashes, and there's wars, and there's a deep, deep faith that is almost untouchable in so many people. And I had so much appreciation for that. And so I took little pieces of that. I took pieces of the Hinduism and the Jainism, and little everywhere I went, from the little temples, and love to see that. And then the same is true when I went to Mexico and I saw that there's like this rich Catholic foundation, and then there's also the old ways, the Mayan practices, and same when I went to South America, and same when I was in Asia, all over. It's like, so I like to say that my practices come from a smattering of so many different practices, and I kind of like the saying, I take what I want and I leave the rest. I take what works for me, and what works for me is prayer. I love prayer. I will always pray. And praying for me looks like gratitude. Looks like offering my gratitude to my life, and the people around me, and it looks like sending good thoughts to those that perhaps need it, and it looks like envisioning a life that I want. That's prayer to me. And it looks like my meditation. It looks like silence. A lot of times that's one of my greatest practices is silence. And that's really where I have the opportunity to have conversations with the divine in whatever capacity that looks like. And movement as well. That's another great practice for me. Yoga, walking in nature. Nature is one of the greatest practices I have, the greatest relationships, I should say, that I have. To connect with her is what brings me home so much to myself and to a greater power.
Yeah. With all that traveling that you've done, what are some of the best experiences that you've had in these places? I've traveled a lot too. I think probably my experiences were very different than yours, because mine were tied to the company that I was working for. And so I'd fly to this really cool place. I'd go from the airport to a hotel. I'd sit in meetings. I'd go back to the airport and I'd fly away. Every once in a while I'd get to go out, and like go to a temple. Like there are places in Tokyo that I just used to love when I lived in Tokyo for a while, and I could get out and just experience the people and the culture a little bit. What were your traveling experiences like?
I must say one of my greatest memories is right after I was diagnosed, shortly after I was diagnosed, I had at that point said no to the Western interventions that they were offering me. I was diagnosed with a pretty progressive type of cancer, lymphoma. So it was in my lymphatic system, which is a risky one because it moves really quickly. So I was given a high risk diagnosis. And so when I said no to the treatments, pretty much people told me it was a death wish, that I was not going to live because of that choice that I made. And I knew inside this voice was telling me it's going to be okay. Trust it. Trust that you know what to do. And what I knew what to do was to travel. It was to go somewhere and explore and see what other people are doing to heal themselves, that I knew that there's more than one way to heal oneself. And so I traveled a lot right after I was diagnosed. I first went to the jungle and explored plant medicines, and that was very powerful and opening. And ultimately, that's where I started to find my voice. And then shortly after that, I went to Bali, and I ended up living in Bali for about 7.5 months. And I was living in an ashram, and I was practicing this type of meditation that was called bioenergetic shaking meditation. So we were standing, we were shaking. And that was such a powerful experience for me, because I got to understand how to connect with my energy body. And that's really where I first understood where disease comes from, that it doesn't just end up in the physical body. It starts somewhere that's deeper than that, which is the emotional body, the spiritual body, and the energetic body. And so I began to forge relationships with these other parts of myself that I hadn't fully met before. And that was so, it was almost easy to do in Bali because everyone around me was doing it. The Balinese just live in this place. It was so inspiring to see a whole culture of people who were led by energy. They were in the flow. You can see it in the way they drive. I mean, it's incredible. They're all on their scooters with 5 people and a bunch of groceries and dogs, and they're flying down these highways and not even following traffic laws, and yet there's a flow.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. I'm sure Japan has something like that too.
Well, in Vietnam, I was in Vietnam for a few days in Hanoi, and people on their bicycles. I just envisioned this in my head. They're going through this intersection without any rhyme or reason, but they all manage it. Like nobody's crashing into anybody else. They're just kind of like weaving in and out. And like I remember there was a family of 6 on a bicycle, all of them on a bicycle, and one of them was carrying a bicycle on his back.
Yep.
Like it was I hadn't seen anything like so yeah, that's why I smiled. I remembered my experience with that.
Yeah, it's incredible. And what I learned from that is that it's a flow.
Yeah.
There's a river of life that is the energy of life. And when people are connected to their energy bodies, they know how to follow the flow. Mm-hmm. And so that is where I learned to connect to my energy body, which ultimately is how I really kickstarted my healing, because I was no longer just focusing on the physical. I was no longer just focusing on the tumors and the symptoms. That symptoms are basically, the way I think of it is, it's like, if you're going to treat symptoms, you're cutting the grass. You're using a lawnmower to cut the grass, when we know that grass is going to grow back. To really treat dis-ease is to pull the roots and find ease. And so for me, that was so much of what I was doing, is going deep into these other bodies and connecting to them and realizing that, oh, this is where dis-ease comes from, is being out of balance in these places that I have not really had a conversation with yet. And so I learned how to do that in these other countries. That's really where I was taught that because I was looking around and everybody else was doing it. Not that they don't get sick in these other countries. There's other reasons, but it's, there's a flow of life. And if we learn how to follow it, it creates ease.
So can you talk more about these energy bodies? Because I can imagine my listening audience going, like, okay, all right, I'm done listening to this stuff. Energy bodies.
Fair enough.
I was raised with this kind of dualistic, worldview, and I reject it because I'm an empirical scientist now. That's not my entire audience, but there is that demographic. How would you explain what an energy body is to someone who's really skeptical of energy in the first place?
That's a great question. So everything is energy, first of all. We are made up of energy. Everything is made of energy. Energy is vibration. And there's no scientist in the world that can disagree with that.
Yeah.
Right? That's, sure. We're talking about atoms, right? They're vibrating, and that vibration creates energy. And so
yeah, it is energy. Yeah.
It is energy. Yeah,
right.
It is.
And
like everything is energy. There's
even beneath the atoms, the energy that makes up the atoms, and the energy that makes up that, and that. Yeah.
Go infinitely into that. That. It's still, science is backing it.
Yeah.
At least they are now. I don't know if they always have been, but it's you can't deny this. Well, you can, sure, you can deny it, but there's many sources that are saying this is just truth.
Mm-hmm.
So to tap into the energy body is to tap into the subtle body. And by that, I mean our physical body, our physical being, our flesh and our bones is the most gross of energy. It's heavy. Gravity is pulling it down. It's able to stay on the earth. To tap into the subtle body is to feel, well, our feelings are in the subtle body, like that's the idea that energy follows thought. So, okay, I'm thinking Eckhart Tolle has this amazing way of describing how to connect into a deeper sense of self. And he says to feel your hands and to really put all your focus into your hands And you get to a point after doing this for several minutes, the hands start to tingle and you feel this very light vibration in the hands. And that is the energy body. That's the subtle body. That's what you're tapping into ultimately. And so it's palpable. It's real. You can absolutely touch it with your thoughts, with your energy, with your attention. And it's like that with anything. Just put your focus on something and you'll feel the layers of it, that we're not just this gross physical body. Gross as in heavy, right. The opposite of light. We are so much more than that, but it takes a certain awareness, a concentration to feel the layers of ourselves. And that's really what I'm saying, is that the energy body is just another layer of ourselves, but it exists within us and around us.
And it's what's creating this gross mass of,
right. It's sourcing us.
Yeah. It is. So it's sourcing us, and it's sourcing those feelings and emotions and all of these things that we're experiencing. And so if I understand what you're saying is trying to maybe turn down the noise that we're used to focusing on, and focus on those things that are going on, those processes that are inside of our bodies, even down to that energetic level. If you can even imagine to what that would feel like to be an oscillating atom with all of the billions of those things that we've got going on inside of us. And really try to focus on what that might be and what that is. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Exactly. And so you saw the people in Bali kind of have that as more of a de facto worldview, that they accept this idea of energy and that they are flowing with energy, and that it's like a river with all of its rapids and things, and there's boulders that come up that you bump up against, but it's just a flow, and to kind of like let go and flow with it. Is that how they are? Yeah, that's how I perceived anyways. Mm-hmm. And I don't think, everyone's fully in that, but so much more than in this country. I notice people are relaxed into that more subtle place within themselves to be able to hear and listen and feel. So you got diagnosed, and how old were you when you got diagnosed? I was 24. I had just gotten out of college. Yeah. 24. And so your reaction, instead of going chemo or whatever the Western medicine routes were, you're like, no, I'm going to travel. You went down to South America. You mentioned plant medicines. That's fascinating. What was your experience like with the plant medicines, and where did you go to Peru or? I started in Costa Rica, actually. Eventually ended up in Ecuador, but I was working with a Peruvian woman who was incredibly knowledgeable about plants of all kinds. And yes, I'm talking about the psychedelic ones, but I'm also talking about, herbalism, just basic plant support, the allies in the plant kingdom that help us get better. And so that was really when I started to get to know these plants and building relationships with them, and finding that they're such amazing teachers and helpers. And so I felt like when I got to the plants, I felt like I had support. And that was such a good feeling like, there's a minute there where I felt totally alone, when people had pretty much resigned to the fact that I was, not going to live. It was, people really kind of gave up on me, and I only had a few people who were really sure with what I was doing as I was, and the plants came in, and just I felt good. I felt supported. I felt like my health was supported, and then with the deeper plants, with the psychedelic plants, in sitting with those in ceremony and really coming with such reverence to these plants. I mean, just bowing before them and asking for their guidance. I received so much guidance. I received an incredible, I wouldn't say complete eradication, but a loosening of the fear of death, of being sick. I was able to understand what sickness is. I was able to see
myself in my light. And that was so helpful in helping me stand up in myself. And ultimately, I think that's the greatest thing, was standing up in myself, loving myself, being true to myself, speaking my truths, and ultimately singing, which is now what I do pretty much for a living.
Yeah.
And before that, I hadn't been singing at all. I was quite terrified of my own voice.
Mm.
And so the plants came in and said, you have to be singing. It's part of what you're meant to do.
Mm.
And if you don't, this is not going to go well. So step
Yeah.
up and use your voice. This is what you're here for.
Yeah.
And so it was within those ceremonies that I started singing, and broke loose a block that was keeping me sick ultimately. And that was one of the greatest tools that got me to wellness, was singing.
Yeah. I love that. And I love the, like it's easy to think of your parents and brothers and sisters and cousins and, extended family as all being part of your family. And we know that whenever we, when the push comes to shove, usually that's family that we turn to for support and love and guidance and teaching and that sort of thing. We don't typically think of family outside of our own species, let alone outside of our own genus or whatever it is. But to think of plants as being distant cousins of ourselves, which also we have common ancestors in with the plants, and we're all life, and life has evolved and taken all of these different branches to where there's 8 billion species of life on the planet, something like that. So to have this experience where you really feel that there is intelligence within this branch of life that is connected to me very, very, very distantly in my past. Is there a way to communicate with that? Is there a way to learn from it? Not just from the observations that I have. I look at the plants, I think about it, and I get some kind of insights that way. But if the plants could actually speak to you somehow, and with that experience of, and that the ayahuasca is that the main psychedelic plant that you were talking about, that you experienced, or were there other
that was the main
psychedelics as well?
one. And psilocybin was the other one that was really helpful. That was the one that was really helpful for fear. That one really went in and explained how to loosen the fear from my body, and ultimately told me that the fear is one of the greatest contributors to disease. So that's a huge thing. To let go of that fear is to let go of sickness in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And just was, because I know people will talk about having a bad trip or something like that. Is that for you, confronting the fears and just kind of like working through? Is that how the psilocybin taught you about fear?
I'm so fortunate. I've never had a bad trip.
Mm.
And I have sat in, I want to say hundreds of ceremonies at this point. And I have yet to, and probably, well, I don't want to say what could happen, but I don't know. Yeah. But I find that set and setting is everything. And I choose very wisely who and where I'm sitting with plant medicines. And I consider the state that I'm in before I go into ceremony. I consider the other people that are in the ceremony. I consider where it's taking place. And because of that, and also, I think I'm just very fortunate. I have always had incredible experiences. That's not to say that I haven't gone to some dark places within myself. I have, but I see those as valuable.
Right.
Those dark places where I confront the fear, and it's not the fear of the medicines. I got over that after the first ceremony. Of course I had fear of going into ceremony and with these big, big medicines. But after the first ceremony, I learned they're my allies, they're friends. I can trust this. So then it was really just confronting the fear of, my life fears, the fear of death, the fear of being disabled, the fear of being harmed, the fear of hurting, the fear of being alone, the fear of being abandoned, these deep ones that I think are quite universal, that I think most of us as humans, when we really get down to the roots of what we have a hard time falling asleep at night, is these fears of that come from the moment we're born, the moment we're separated from source, and and that great gap that is created from the second we leave the womb creates certain fears, certain innate things that I think we all have in common.
Yeah, boy, I want to explore that with you more, and maybe we'll do that another time, because I really want to get to your song. But before we do, so you're 24 years old, you get diagnosed with the cancer, and at what point is the cancer gone?
It took me 2 years, a little over 2 years. I traveled for a long time, and I met amazing healers and shamans and plants, and I learned how to feed myself well. I learned how to exercise my body well. I learned how to communicate well, and how powerful my words were, and especially the ones I was saying to myself. And I got all these tools for how to take care of myself through all of this. Ultimately, I found my happy, which I'm convinced that health and happiness are directly correlated. And so to be happy is to already have a foundation of health. And so much of my unhealth was coming from unhappiness, I believe. I still believe. So I gathered all these things, and then I came back to the States, and there came to this point where I kind of just knew, the same way I knew to say no to chemotherapy in the beginning, I knew that it was time for some Western intervention as well. That it was like I had done all the spiritual work, all the energetic work, and there was still a little bit of cancer left in my body, which was amazing because it had reduced by probably 70% at that point. I was pretty much on my way. The doctors were they were amazed that I was still alive, let alone that the cancer was reduced by that much. And then I just kind of knew, like, yeah, I think there's one last step in this. And so I went to a hospital, and I ended up doing chemotherapy, which is to me the most interesting part of the story, because at this point I had been standing up for alternative healthcare and alternative ways of healing, and thinking that this is the right way, and then there's a wrong way. And then of course, the great humbling powers come in and say, there is no right or wrong. Whatever you need to do to heal, you do.
Yeah.
And it just kind of slapped me in the face. It took all judgments out. It shattered my ego, and ultimately created a bridge in my life. Created a bridge between medicines, which is what I do today. I practice Ayurveda, which is an Indian, ancient Indian medical system. And so I work with that as a healing tool. But I work with people who are very integrated into Western medicine. So it's so important for me that I know both worlds very well. And I do, because I've experienced both worlds very well. So I have no bias against either, because I know them. And it was during this, the time in chemotherapy where, because I was humbled, I was on my knees, just in awe of how life can shift so quickly without us having any idea that it's going to happen. That's when I picked up a guitar. It was kind of this place where I had nothing to lose. And I wrote my first song when I was kind of at the bottom of the well. And that is the song that saved my life. And I got a scan maybe a few weeks after that, and it was totally clean. And so today I'm cancer free. And I'd like to say that there was nothing in particular that did that. It was everything I did that brought me to healing. It was every step of the way was so important in my healing. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for every single thing I did. And so
what's the title of that song, the first one that you wrote?
It's the title of that song is called Sunrise, and there is a secret way to find it. I have it on SoundCloud. Not many people know about it, but I did record it and professionally recorded it, and so I'm really proud of it.
As gold spills over the ocean. The sun sails out to sea. The land slips to the arms of darkness. What if the sun never wakes from his blanket of the ocean and the earth takes her last breath? A mother dies, leaving her baby. All he remembers is her sweet smell. Have you kissed your mother lately? She gives life only with love, and she gives and gives and gives, and never asks anything in return. So each day when we wake, we give thanks for this day of life, 'cause we never know when the sun won't rise. And each day, caught in the sway of who we were and we're meant to be, in this place we thrive. In this place we live life. Fall awake from your daydreams. All you have is who you are. Reality is rarely what it may seem. What if our fear of death was simply a mental illusion, keeping us from living life? Do you ever think that what you have been searching for has been inside you this whole time? For these bones were carved of the dust from stars and the secrets of our ancestors, and in the end we go back to where we began. So each day when we wake, we give thanks for this day of life, 'cause we never know when the sun won't rise. And each day, caught in the sway of who we were and we're meant to be, in this place we thrive. In this place we live life, 'cause we never know when the sun won't rise.
But I just, after I made the album, I kind of forgot about this, like, this little thing I recorded. So I have it out there. If people want to find me on SoundCloud, they can find this.
Well, I'd love to play it here too, because
Sure.
I heard it this last weekend when we were together, and I had the privilege of witnessing you and your mom together as you sang that, and she's like, "Oh, I remember it." And you said, "This was, you were my first audience for this song, and you probably know this better than anybody else." And yeah, as it just like sitting there and listening to that, it's such a beautiful song. And so that came, you said before the chemo, after the chemo, it was somewhere during.
Because I was just, like I said, I had nothing to lose. I was just, at the bottom and totally shattered and broken open and so close to death. Not because of the cancer, because of the chemo.
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to do what all these plant medicines have been telling me to do, what all these teachers and gurus and shamans have been telling me to do. I just have to sing. And so at that point I just got over the fear. I just like jumped over the hurdle and wrote that song in like 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
It was written. It just came right through, wrote itself. And it was like, one of the greatest reliefs I had ever felt in my life. Like I was holding all this tension in my body, and the second that song was written, I was able to let go. And
that's awesome.
And then the cancer was gone, and that was it. And so that I'm such a huge advocate for people singing, and this is why, because it saved my life. I'm here today because I sing. So I really love to hear other people's voices too, because it's such a powerful tool for healing ourselves.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to get that link so I can get that song and I can include that one too. But in we've got maybe 10 or 15 minutes before you have to go. So let's talk about the Ho'oponopono song and how, like, where did it come from? Why did you sing it? What's the story behind it? As much as you're willing to share.
Yeah. My high school sweetheart, who I think we met when we were 14. And we were together on and off for 16 years. Mm-hmm. He's one of the deep loves of my life. And yet there was this knowing in our relationship that we just weren't meant to be together. And that is one of the most excruciating feelings I've ever known, is to be so deeply in love with someone and know that we can't be in union in the way that we wanted to be. And we were living together at the time, and we decided to part ways. And as I was moving out, that song started coming, and it started coming as I just started singing Ho'oponopono, which, as you said earlier, Ho'oponopono is a ancient Hawaiian healing practice that is really, really powerful in, it's a salve for these relationship wounds that we may have, and these untied ties, and these ways in which we may end things and they may hurt, or they may feel incomplete, or maybe someone dies and we don't get to say what we needed to say. We don't get to make our amends. This is a way to make amends without having to have a conversation with that person again. It's how we make amends within ourselves. And so that we can die complete, and so I was singing the Ho'oponopono, which, and the words are, I'm sorry. Well, the original words are, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. And that didn't quite resonate for me, so I heard another version, and I started singing that one, which is, I'm sorry, I forgive you, thank you, I love you. And I was singing that over and over and over and over and over and over again. And then the words started coming. And if you listen to the song, here's a little tidbit about it. The song is an evolution song. So you'll hear the beginning, and in the beginning, there's kind of this the first lines are, I knew it would end this way, 2 broken hearts on a rainy day.
I knew it would end this way, 2 broken hearts on a rainy day. There isn't much left to say. We both know it's time for us to go our own ways. Surrender to this moment. There is no one to blame. There is no right or wrong here, only lessons in love and pain. We did what we were meant to do. I was me and you were you, finally ready to see this whole thing through. I'm sorry, I forgive you, thank you, I love you. I'm sorry, I forgive you, thank you, I was hurting, I hurt others. I wanted them to feel the same. When I go into the heartache, I dive as deep as I can go, and I end up at the bottom, face to face with my very own soul. It says I've been here all along, and then it smiles at my surprise, for all I had to do was come right back inside. So thank you for the breaking, and thank you for the pain, for without you in my life I may not be finding myself again. I'm sorry, I forgive you, thank you, I love you. I'm sorry, I forgive you, thank you, I love you. Love, it doesn't go away. It lives right below the fear and the pain. So I fill my heart with my very own love, and I radiate it out. Below and above, I send it to you in abundance and wealth. For I know that to love you, I must first love myself. I'm sorry, I forgive you, thank you, I love you. I'm sorry, I forgive you, thank you, I love you. I'm sorry, I forgive you, thank you, I love you. I'm sorry, I forgive you, thank you, I love you. I'm sorry, I forgive you, thank you, I love you.
It's this like, you can feel my pain when you hear the song. Like it's so painful, and it's so like sad and harrowing. And the first I wanted to say the first chapter, but the first verse, which is the first chapter, is like that. It's so, I'm so in my pain body about it. And then as you listen to the song, it starts to evolve into understanding the relationship and understanding why we have to go our own ways. And so we get to the second chapter, the second verse, and I start to talk about how divine it is, how perfect it is, how we're both playing these roles, and it's all just part of the divine play, that you are you and I am me, and we came together for this reason. We had to give each other something, and then we part, and there's no blame. Nobody did anything wrong. We're both just here to share our company for this time until it's time to part, and it is time to part now. And so it's just a goodbye song, but it's a healing in that goodbye. And so the song, when you listen to it, you'll hear all the way to the last verse is when we get to the last verse, the kicker, the big line that usually gets everyone right in the heart is love never goes away. And that when I finally got to that line in the song, I understood that this isn't a goodbye. This is a separation. Yes, we're decoupling, uncoupling, but that doesn't mean that I won't love you for the rest of my life. I don't have to stop loving you. I just have to go on my own path and you have to go on yours.
Mm-hmm.
And to understand that was a profound understanding for me in my life. And it has changed and shaped all of my relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like the little tweak that you made to the traditional Ho'oponopono. Instead of please forgive me, I forgive you. I like that because you're taking responsibility for every piece of that 4-part formula.
Right.
And you're not saying, oh, once you forgive me, then I will, like putting it on the other person. It's like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. The line that always jumps out to me, and this comes to me, whether I'm listening to the song or not, is the thank you for the breaking. Thank you for the pain. And then what does it say after that? It's because of that, I was able to find myself again, something like that.
Without you in my life, I would not be finding myself again.
Yeah. So I filled myself with my very own love, and, like realizing that in order to love anybody else, you first have to love yourself. And that's such a powerful, I absolutely love that message.
Well, ultimately it brings us back to what I had said earlier, that when we were talking about my religious background, that religiously I had to come back to myself to find truth. And it's the same story here, that for me to be able to find the truth in this and the salve and the beauty in this relationship, I had to come back to myself. I had to learn to love myself first to be able to truly settle and let it be healed and let go and move on with my life in a happy way, so that I don't have to hold on to stuff. And that's it. I think that's the key to life, really, and healing, is to come back to ourselves over and over and over again and find our salvation in ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many relationships that I've personally been involved with, that I've seen people around me in, where you just get stuck in the stories of victimhood and pain. And, I'm talking about myself here too. My first marriage was 17 years and we had 3 kids together, and we still can't get along. It's just, and I find myself still getting into times where it's like blaming. Well, if you would have been this way, I would have, and recognizing, no, I've got to knock that off. The best thing is to just be grateful, to go, okay, because you put this resistance in my life, it really forced me into some uncomfortable feelings and emotions and situations. And my personality type, I usually avoid the discomfortable, or, the uncomfortable, the discomfort, and just want to do like fun things and create all kinds of distractions, so I don't have to feel that deep pain that's inside. But if I can get to that place where I'm grateful and I can say, thank you for the breaking and thank you for the pain. If I could really get to that place where I'm grateful for anything that comes into my life, then nobody has any power to like piss me off or get me off of my stride, or, whatever it is. I've created that flexibility in my own worldview, my own way of being and existing in the world, just kind of going with the flow stuff that you've talked so much about, that energy body. So I'm really into, I've been gravitating more towards this direction a lot in the last few years. And I think especially coming out of the Mormon church, there's so much anger that and so much blame and such a strong sense of I was lied to. I was lied to my entire life. Look at all of these lies. And it takes a while for the pain and the throbbing of that to settle down long enough for me to be able to sit in and go, okay, now what is this really about? What's really going on in here? And can I actually be grateful for all of those lies? Can I be grateful for all of those things? So you're an inspiration to me, Sara.
Oh, so glad.
Yeah. So how can people reach out? And I do want to have you back on the podcast and talk about other songs that you've done and other stories, other things that you've learned. How can people reach out to you and get in touch with you if they'd like to?
Yes, I always welcome contacts and questions and comments. The best way to reach me is these days through my email, and I'm launching a website right now. It's just not ready yet for my Ayurvedic practice and my music. But for now, email's best. And do you just want to post it?
Yeah, if you want to say it, you can say it, and then I'll also put it on the website.
So it's my last name, EMMITTS16 @gmail.com. And then if you would like to hear album, the Ho'oponopono song, a great way to listen to that is on Bandcamp. And we go by the Emmitt sisters. My sister and I made the album together. But you can find it anywhere, iTunes, Amazon, Google, anywhere you listen to music, you'll be able to find the album. So please check it out and let me know what you think. And,
What's the title of your album?
The title of the album is called Moon Over Mountains, and we're both we're born and raised in the mountains right outside of Colorado, or right outside of Boulder in Colorado. So you can hear the mountains in the album, I like to think. And we have a Facebook page as well, my sister and I, the Emmitt sisters, on Facebook, and you can like us and we'll let you know about our tour dates.
Cool. All right. Thanks for coming on, Sara. Like I said, I'd love to have you back. Any final words, anything that comes to you that you want to share before we're gone for today?
Yeah. First of all, I'd love to be back. Thank you for having me today. It's a privilege and honor. And I mean, if I can leave you with one thing, it's that I so deeply believe in our power to heal ourselves. And I think that belief is that power. So to believe that we can heal ourselves, we're already most of the way there. So hold on to that. And if there's people out there who are struggling with their health or with somebody in their life that's struggling, one of the greatest things you can do is just believe in your healing, because it's up to you to empower yourself to heal. You can't put that power on a doctor. It's your bodies that you have to take care of, and your body follows the thoughts. So check out the thoughts. And if you believe in your healing, then you have way more of a chance.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Sara.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm so happy I got to talk to you today.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. What did you think about what you heard today? Can you say thank you for the breaking and thank you for the pain? Do you think it's possible, or that it would even be valuable, to condition yourself to be grateful for even the most challenging experiences you encounter in life? If so, maybe I can help you. I've been developing some pretty good coaching skills, you know. If you'd like to explore this further and talk with me one-on-one, shoot me an email at infantsonthrones@gmail.com, and let's schedule a time to talk, free of charge, because believe it or not, I really actually want to hear from you. So what are you waiting for? You listen to me on this podcast, let's have a real conversation. Email me today, infantsonthrones@gmail.com. And thanks again for listening to Infants on Thrones.
Hi, this is Hillary.
Matthew, Brian,
Carol,
Keith,
Ashley, and I like to play bingo online while listening to Infants on Thrones.
You can comment on this episode on the website, infantsonthrones.com.
And if you really like what you hear, give the Quorum a 5-star rating and write a short review on iTunes.
I did.
I did. Anyone for the closing prayer?
Please forgive me. I love you, and I thank you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you, and I thank you.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.